let's talk about waves. I don't mean this kind of wave, although, hi. I mean the kind of wave that in the ocean that goes up and comes back down. It starts out here, goes up, crests, and comes back down here. In music, there could be a lot of those, and I'm learning by teaching too, because I'm realizing right now that it could be a wave of intensity, right? Because you could start and get more intense, and then drift back down, right? A lot of music does that. Never really thought of that as a wave before, but it really is. It's a wave. If you graphed that intensity or the loudness, it would go up and then it would come back down. That is a wave, absolutely. There's also a wave you could say in rhythm too. You know, it's just something that starts with, doesn't even have to get louder, but gets more intense and then drifts off. Right? It gets faster. That could be a wave too in terms of frequency. But this type of wave we're going to talk about is specifically with melodies. And it's basically something that starts anywhere on the piano, goes up, and comes back down. And I actually probably heard the phrase, or the concept of a wave in terms of melody from this book originally by Ernst Toch, composer from the early 1900s, mid-1900s. It's called The Shaping Forces of Music. One of my college professors at the University of Connecticut recommended this to me. It was not in the curriculum. I used to read a lot, still do, that, you know, things that weren't in the curriculum. It basically gives classical music examples, and it really dives deep into a lot of the shaping forces of music. Again, The Shaping Forces of Music, Ernst Toch, T-O-C-H, and it has things about, it has a chapter on melody, melody versus harmony, counterpoint, form, things like that. Very, very insightful. It's not necessarily like a textbook to take you from A to Z learning these techniques, but it helps you understand these things in music. Very, very good book if you want to get right into it in the context of classical music. But as we're going to learn today, those principles apply to any type of music, which is really cool. So Toch calls it the wave line, you know, the melodic line. And basically, there's lots of examples of this. We don't even think about it, but Mozart's, think about it, that goes up, and then it goes back down, and it ends where it started. And then he does another wave. It goes up higher, and it doesn't quite get to the same, it doesn't have to start and end on the same note. It's just this thing where it just goes up and down. So he has one wave, and then another one, a little higher. And then the next thing, as if Mozart was reading my mind here in terms of waves, so he just waves. Right? That's one example from classical music. Another one is Bach's thing. Those don't really go back down. He's not going, not quite doing that. But when he starts the next one, it's kind of like the beginning of a new wave. So I think it has that same kind of effect of these waves. Now, you might be thinking, doesn't every music have waves, you know? But not really. Like Beethoven did not use waves all the time in this respect. Like, that's not a wave yet. He might have done them later on in the piece where he does these. Those are waves. But at the beginning, he doesn't do a wave there. Not all composers use this in the same way. Another one is Hey Jude. Let's see what key was it in, G, I think. That's a wave. It starts out here. Stays at the top. Da 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 da. Comes down. That's a wave too. And the fascinating thing about this is that a lot of the melodies that have become the most famous actually have these kind of wave formations. So how does that help us as an improviser? Well, again, like a lot of the things we're doing in so far in this series, we're not really obsessing with them while we're playing. Like when you're improvising, I don't want you necessarily thinking, okay, it's my turn to play solo, let me start playing a wave. You can do it sometimes to get you started, but then lose yourself in the music and just, when you're performing, it's different than practicing. But when you're practicing, you can do that. So you could be playing a 12-bar blues, just with the blues scale, and practice going up and down with these waves. 1, 2, 3, 4. See? Waves. Short wave. Wave. Kind of started up a little high, but it went up a little bit and then came way back down. Those are waves. And then you can experiment. Actually, in the classic blues in New Orleans course, I think it's lesson 2 or 3, I talk about riffs and waves, where you could have a riff that doesn't do this. And then you do your wave. But you could even argue that some of those riffs are waves when it goes up and down, right? The interesting thing is that it's one of these things that can make you more interested in music, in the exploration of music. And that's my main point in this part of the this study of melodic improv strategies. Use this idea of waves as a way to get deeper into music without necessarily thinking you have to do it all the time, because you don't. It'll come out naturally once you get used to this. So you could listen to a recording, and you're listening to Miles Davis play the trumpet or something. Let's say mid-1950s Bye Bye Blackbird, So the band's playing. And Miles goes. Was that a wave? Absolutely. It just sort of crept up, and sometimes it doesn't go straight up. It's like do 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 do. Sometimes they start at the top. You might just go. Sort of started at the top of the wave. It's not really a wave, but in context of studying waves, you could see. Sometimes you just get a bunch of stuff going up. It could almost seem like the front part of a wave. And then the next part might come down, Charlie Parker would do this. He would sort of start sometimes at the top there, or actually he would go up. He would do stuff like, this is in the intermediate jazz course, this lick that goes, Charlie Parker. Starting by going up, coming down. You can hear it in the most gentle, new agey type music. I'm just in C here. Just kind of do this thing, this motion that's about to go up, and then it sort of went up and over the wave. Improvising over Pachelbel's canon. It started by going up, and then sequence of phrases, even connected ones, can be seen as a series of goings up and down. And again, you might be saying, okay, well, all music does this. It's interesting. It doesn't do the opposite. It doesn't go down and come back up too much. You don't necessarily go. And in there. It seems almost unfinished. It's interesting. This is one of those things that's behind a lot of music, and music from around the world too. Indian classical music, where there's a drone, and the flute, the tablas, and the flute is playing, That was D mixolydian with the C natural and the F sharp, but you're going up, going up. That's sort of imitation of Indian classical music, right? I don't know that music too well, but I listen to it. I love listening to it. And you hear that kind of thing all the time, where it's going up, going down, and they can sustain this for like 40 minutes, an hour. One piece of music because of this interest. Is it going up? Okay, you can almost call it, I wouldn't say tension, relaxation necessarily, but it's like heightened expectation and then resolution. You could look at it like that. What's going to happen? Same thing with that Miles Davis. It's like, where's it going? If you're doing a pop ballad, like Let It Be. At the end, is that sort of a resolution, like, at the end of the wave kind of thing. We just went up and down. So what you can do to really study this is just listen to melodies. Just listen to different melodies. Went up. Comes back down, and then the next part's sort of an incomplete wave. It starts at the top, does it again, and then it starts out again like the beginning, and comes to a final resolution. So, two things you can do, and this is a long term. You could study, music for a year. You could listen to different pieces of music all year. And just see if they're following waves and if they're not. And you'll learn so much about music like that. You can listen to Ozzy Osbourne melodies. Crazy Train. Is there a wave in that melody or not? You might be surprised that there are waves in there. Not sure. But the guitar solo. Listen to the guitar solo. Randy Rhoads. Very classically influenced too. So there might be some waves in there. I'm not really sure. But that's the point. You'll be able to see, does this have a wave or not? And it's something to focus in on. It's a question that you have that you can follow through music for a whole year, really, or longer. Really interesting. You can listen to a jazz solo and say, is this musician following these waves or not? Miles Davis does. A lot of times when you hear a jazz solo that's not so great, even if it's a great player, just kind of meandering or it's not interesting, it's because they're not following those waves. It's interesting. The jazz saxophonist Lee Konitz, even though he's wonderful, and I love some of his music, but some of it kind of leaves me a little cold, personally. And I realize he doesn't necessarily follow these waves. I'll have to listen again. Maybe the solos I like are the ones that do that. I don't know why. But it's something you learn after the fact. It's not like I'm going to like this composer or this improviser because they do waves or not. It's like sometimes that music feels a little more satisfying to us, but not always. Like I said, Beethoven did not always use them. Beethoven would build the wave long term, going back to what I said at the beginning of this. Like he would use texture and almost like he was building a hurricane. The slow movement in his Seventh Symphony is sort of like that. It sort of just builds in this huge peak over time and then comes back down. It's not like every little thing is a wave within itself, whereas Mozart would use them much more like that. Mozart's music is not always built to that huge peak in the same way that Beethoven did. Some of it might. So be interested in this when you're listening. It's fascinating. And then sometimes try it out in your piano playing. And at the same time, let it become something that's internalized. And so you don't really think about it so much when you're improvising and, with other musicians or in public. It'll start coming out more and more, and it'll help your music in general. So enjoy this. Glad I can share it with you. And then as we move further in this series, we're going to start to look at motifs and some very specific ways you can practice developing ideas and really getting into the structure of melodies. Enjoy.